that you're struggling with. So I think I'll just pass back to Ross now. I hope that's clear enough about how we're going to go.
Cool, thank you very much, John. Okay, you probably saw me point at a child asking her to not wash her hands in this room so that it didn't like just get a torrent of water as your background noise. Okay. I think it'd be quite good if we can kind of open things up and just get a flavour for any particularly kind of good examples. So anything that people have been doing at the moment that's working really well. It'd be good to hear some kind of best practice that's going on. And this could either be a service that you've already been delivering digitally, or it could be one where you've pivoted to delivering digitally during COVID-19. I don't know if anyone wants to share any examples or if there's anything else coming in from chat. Okay. I might pick on someone that I recognise in the room, if not. This is the terror of Zoom calls. Okay, there we go. Right, Tori is talking about physio sessions which have moved to Zoom and Skype. Tori, do you want to unmute yourself and tell us a bit about that? Tori, where are you? You've vanished. Tori's not in here. She's getting stage fright. That's okay. Well, we can if you can stick that in the document, we can do that with people.
Samantha might be willing to share a bit about what she's been up to.
Hi.
Hello, how are you doing, Samantha?
Hello.
I work for Crossgates and District Good Neighbours, so we support over 60s up in East Leeds. And we were teaching people digitally, doing IT classes. And we've just set up over Zoom to do some virtual coffee mornings with our members. None of them have got the skills at the moment, so I've been doing one-to-ones with people. Sorry, my phone was just ringing. We've been doing one-to-ones with people just to get them set up, because the biggest barrier can be the technology. But we've got people some are over 80 that are accessing Zoom with us. So I'll do a quick 20-minute call with them, send them a Zoom link, talk them through it and get them on the call. But so we're not really dealing with high numbers, so I've got the time to do that. I know people might be dealing with higher numbers than us, but generally the ones that are coming on, they can all manage to get on the call, which is really good. So I bring them in for a practice one-to-one with me, then bring them into the group session first. That's how I've been doing it. So tomorrow we've got a coffee and a quiz. And we're going to roll that out and do more activities every week. Hopefully get more sessions up and running. But the thing that we're doing is we're capping it to 6 to 8 people, because like you said on here, if you get too much background noise going on, people can't chat as well. So we are capping it at that.
Okay, brilliant. Excellent. Thanks, Samantha. We've got Stuart Valentine, who's the Chief Exec of Relationship Scotland, who are the biggest relationship counselling and family mediation charity in Scotland. So he's going to jump on a wee second, just talk about how they've kind of pivoted to delivering some of those services which are particularly vital at this point in time online. Stuart, I don't know if you want to tell us a bit about that.
Thank you, Ross. Happy to come in here. Yeah, just to say, so we support people with relationship problems across all of the country. We provide counselling, mediation and other services. The one that we're trying to rapidly increase the use of just now is for a relationship counselling service. So that might be both individuals or couples. We've done a little bit of that around the country, but very quickly overnight, we're trying to sort of rapidly increase, usually Zoom we would use for this. And we're trying to, in particular, continue with our current clients, so there's not an interruption to the support that they're having. So in Glasgow, for example, we've got 10 counsellors in our Glasgow service that have already started and set up doing that, and others are trying to do it as well. Some of the hurdles can be things like, how do you do payment online? How do you get the payment sorted? How do you ensure safety issues? Potential risk for safety, domestic violence. How do you screen for that if you're bringing in new couples? So those types of issues are happening, but we're rapidly trying to increase the use of online counselling, and in particular to try to keep income coming into the charity as well. So of course it's about clients support, but also about the issue of the finance coming into the charity too.
Yeah, thanks for that, Stuart. Yeah, so the issue that keeps coming up time and time again is actually not the technology so much, but about the kind of privacy and safety. And I guess it'd be interesting again to get some of your thoughts on this stuff, John, but not throwing your kind of privacy and safety stuff out the window, because we're finding ourselves in these very, very difficult times. I know the ICO has said they're going to be a wee bit more relaxed at this point in time because people are having to make changes very, very quickly. There's some good links, that big messy document that John described it, and that's exactly what it is. But if you scroll right down the bottom there, there's some really good examples of policies and processes around privacy and safety in there, and basically they're there for you to adapt. There's ones, Bernardo's have actually put in some really good stuff. They're using WhatsApp as a tool to engage with younger people, and they've done a lot of work, and they've got quite a big digital team to think through some of the kind of privacy and safety concerns around that. And when you link through to that, it takes you to a Google folder, which has got basically everything that they're doing around that. So if any of you are thinking about live chat, particularly using WhatsApp as a platform, that's one that I would go and have a look at. But yes, if you scroll down, there's a section called specific safety and privacy issues, and there's maybe about 12 different kind of documents, risk assessment documents, a whole bunch of stuff in there that's going to be useful for you in terms of thinking through some of those things. Okay. John, I don't know if you've got anything to add in terms of the kind of privacy and safety side of things that you want to kind of talk about.
Yeah, so I think one really important thing to keep in mind is some online platforms like Zoom, for example, people can join and withhold their contact details. So if you're on this call, I'm not going to automatically know your phone number or your email unless you choose to share that. But other systems, like WhatsApp would be one example. If you're in a WhatsApp group, you're going to be disclosing your phone number. So it's really, particularly if you're working with young people, it's really worthwhile thinking through any implications around that, because at one level, it's great that charities are willing to experiment and try new things quite quickly, but you have to keep in mind those principles around safeguarding and privacy. They're really important. So I think in Bernardo's toolkit that Ross has probably just linked to in the chat, but it is definitely in the Google document. They went through that process and thought through, right, what are the risks? So I think one of the things that they did was ensure that any workers using WhatsApp as a channel were doing it using a work mobile, so that there was, visibility of what kind of chats were going on. YouthLink Scotland, I don't know if they're on the call this morning, but they have been part of work on digital youth work. So they've been part of European projects to think through what the risks and opportunities are with reaching out on digital channels.
There's a really good link, I think it's digitalyouthwork.eu. There's a link to it in that document, but it gathers up, if any of you are working with younger people or delivering specific youth work services, that's got loads of kind of policies and guidance in there that are really useful. Hasna, I don't know if you want to mention, so I've talked about obviously some critical frontline services that are one-to-one, but actually I think not losing sight of some of you, this is about how do you use these tools to kind of build community and bring people together. So Hasna was on the news the other day for the service that she's been delivering. Hasna, do you want to quickly talk about that? You'll need to unmute. There we go.
Hi there, hello. This is brilliant. I've been so looking forward to this, so thank you very much for the opportunity. Very interesting to hear from Samantha and what's happening in Leeds with the virtual cafes or coffees. That's a brilliant idea. That's exactly what we're kind of like doing with the virtual daytime disco. So we run a daytime disco normally in a nightclub targeting older adults. So normally it's people in their 50 plus, right up to people in their 90s, people who live in their own homes and people from care homes as well. So I had to think drastically on Friday the 13th after that Cobra meeting about what I'm going to do next, because our disco was on the Monday and this was on the Friday, and at that time a lot of day centres were still planning to run the following week, but I made a decision that it was, yeah, the risk was just too high for older adults. So I had to really think on my feet. And what we were already using was WhatsApp. So we had a WhatsApp group. Of course, that excluded a lot of older people who don't use WhatsApp. And some people have a mobile, almost everyone has a mobile phone with the people that I'm working with, but they have those dinosaur phones with no internet facilities. So the stepping stone for us was the WhatsApp group. Just needed to press that video button, and that was kind of easy to inform people. So we did a pilot on the first Monday after the Cobra meeting, and WhatsApp only has a capacity of 4 people, including me. So there's only 3 folk, but it worked really well. People were mesmerized that they could see each other. It was just fascinating. And I also had to tell folk, rather than having the phone next to their ear that they used to move it away, and the positioning and things. It was just incredible doing that bit of learning. And I am definitely an IT novice, so I've had to then go from WhatsApp to a bigger platform, and the only familiar one that I was we've all heard of is Skype. So we went for Skype with the same ladies. So that was about 8 ladies, and right at that time, the families were still visiting folk, we were still visiting them, so they helped in setting up Skype for them. And then there was some bits and bobs that I could do through trial and error. And yeah, we managed to get it going. So our plan was to do this virtual daytime disco. We had a deadline for a week from when we started. So we had Skype practice every single night. And it was really good just to touch base as well on all the loneliness stuff, and people were already self-isolating even before the stricter measures were put in just to protect themselves. So yeah, it worked really well. Only thing with Skype is, just like I've never used Zoom before, this is the first time, with Skype there's lots of round circles with people in it, so we can't see everybody. We only see 4 people at a time. But here I can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, which is interesting. So it's not much more, but yeah, Skype is up to 50 people. So we're targeting that for once a month. But because it's a disco, we don't really need to have these sound issues as much. And we've thrown in a quiz as well, Samantha. But we're getting participants to make up the quiz. So yeah, no, I'd love to chat to you more, Samantha, about your work and how we can work together. That'd be cool. Yeah. If there are, my big ask is, Ross, I've got a big ask if you don't mind, is if there are any organisations out there with who can provide some volunteers to help me learn about these basic platforms so I'm more efficient, how to set up Skype better, I'd really appreciate that, some consultancy.
So the form that's in the Google Docs, if you click that form, you can get, and that will come to
Thank you for listening.
Yeah, that's right. So Pasna can share, so if you want to mute yourself, Pasna.
Oh, yeah.
So Pasna can share, she actually tweeted out the video that was on the news to give you a flavour for what it looked like, because it is, you need to see it, it's pretty amazing, and some really cool stuff going on. Okay, I thought it'd be worthwhile as well, just we'll kind of take in any specific issues that people are dealing with, but I thought it'd be worthwhile just quickly bringing in Irene McIntosh from More Collective. Just, I'm putting you totally on the spot here, Irene, but if you've got any kind of top tips in terms of people thinking through digital inclusion, because this is coming up a lot where people are working with groups, and not just older people who are digitally excluded, and how do we deal with this in this particularly difficult time? So I don't know if, Irene, you've got any kind of quick things that people should be doing.
I suppose Pasha gave really brilliant examples of where I would start with, which is working with that group at exactly the level that they're at. So it's really kind of important to look at the devices that they have, the platforms that they're using, and really importantly, the platforms, family and friends, and existing social groups that exist in the real world where those guys are meeting electronically already. So an example of that would be if there is a Facebook group, a Facebook community there already that people are using, even if they're quite digitally excluded, sometimes people will be using Facebook. So using that familiar platform to kind of help engage people, I think, is probably my top one. So to be really kind of flexible, so rather than, and pass it, like whizzed through about 3 different examples, you can see how excited she is about using whatever is needed. And I think we all have to kind of take that really creative approach and go, okay, I can flip from one platform to another and do a needs assessment with that person, like, or with to work out what's so there's not one clear solution, I don't think.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice, is actually, you know, just understanding what your users are using at the moment. And this came up, actually, there was a kind of older people's charity had got in touch, and they've been given advice by someone from the kind of tech sector that they should all be using Signal, which is an open source messenger app. Now, I am hazarding a guess that if you ask most people of any age, never mind if they're over 70, do you have Signal on your device? Do you understand how it works? You're probably going to get a lot of very, very blank stares. So there's some thought into kind of, you know, what might be best practice and what might be an ideal platform, but actually the platform you're using, as Ivan said, should be the one that people are using and are comfortable with already. I'd be interested to take in if there's either from chat, Jen, I don't know if it's come in, or if anyone's got any kind of specific issues that they're facing, whether it's about the technology or the user base that you're working with, or how you take a face-to-face service and deploy it digitally. Has anyone got any specific questions about that?
Ross, there are a couple in the Google Doc.
Okay, cool. Okay. Any?
Well, one that I just saw bounce into the chat that was an interesting scenario was working with people with accessibility needs. So Zoom as a possible medium on that. So people that are maybe going to struggle with processing and understanding information. So I think one, you know, obviously the standard way you can use Zoom is as a kind of live tool, but I think one thing that's quite easy to do now is to do short video clips. So most of the online meeting apps that you can make use of, you could record a short video clip and then share it. So if that's about explaining what a policy is like, for some service users, that might be an effective way of using the tool. And I think one like really useful point that Irene was highlighting is combining platforms as well. So for example, we're using a Google form to capture information here. We wouldn't necessarily email that to service users because not all service users might be on email, but we can certainly send a link in WhatsApp. So sometimes you can get 2 quite simple tools, and by combining them together, you generate something that gives you much more value, but at the same time, it's still meeting users where they are. You know, the main thing is to not demand too much of users, not kind of suddenly hit them with lots of technology that they're going to struggle with, but try and make sure the experience they have fits into what they're comfortable with using.
Yeah, really good advice. And just to reiterate, the SCVO link, which we mentioned before, John's gathered up some good tools, and I guess given some examples of where you can kind of pair things together. So simple booking tools like Calendly, for example. And I think what we're finding as the kind of requests come in, it's almost as if there's almost kind of 2 sets of technology requests that are coming in a lot from charities at the moment. Part of it is the kind of one-to-one connection, whether it's using something like WhatsApp or whether it's using something like Zoom. But actually there's a big issue about, you know, we used to do everything in an office and someone picked up a phone and then it went a paper-based diary, and now all that stuff's out the window. So that kind of very process-driven stuff for a lot of charities needs a complete rethink. Rob Murray, you were going to come in there.
Yeah, so Rob Murray, Cancer Support Scotland. So we've had to completely change our whole setup. We were face-to-face to support people affected by cancer, and everything has had to change. So for our counselling side of things, that's fine, because we've over the past week put in the proper safety frameworks to move to digital counselling, telephone, email, Zoom, etc. One of the things that I was speaking to my team that are doing stress management, so we were supposed to be launching a sort of stress management group setting next week, and that's no longer going to happen because it was face-to-face, but we're trying to see if we could deliver stress management workshops in a group setting on Zoom. And I'm just keen to find out if anyone's had any experiences of doing anything in a sort of therapeutic, sort of counselling type stress management setting on one of these type of packages, because I think the one-to-one interaction, I can see how Zoom could be good, but when it's a group setting, it can be slightly more challenging, and you've also got the confidentiality elements not there, whereas you can get that when you're one-to-one. Just don't know if you've come across any examples of where that's worked well over the past week.
Okay. Have you got how large are the groups, Rob?
They're not massive, so they're 6 people, and they're the groups. So there are 2 different types of groups. One of the groups is for those who have the cancer, and the other group is for those that are family members, because they both have different issues. So max would be about 6 people plus the 2 therapists as well.
Okay. Okay. Anyone that's on the call at the moment have experience of that? Has anyone brought together groups online and can talk about the logistics of that? Anyone working in that space? Okay.
Emma, do you want to jump in?
Emma, are you about? Yeah, we can't hear you for some reason. I don't know if something's on mute, maybe.
There's also someone from Guernsey, I think, waving.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. While we're waiting for Emma, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, sure. I'm Ellie. I'm in Guernsey. We run an LGBT charity here. So we've moved quite a few different things with groups online. So we've used Zoom. We have like a choir that happens on a Friday night. So we're live streaming that as a meeting via sort of Zoom, so everyone can chat together. It doesn't work very well for sort of harmonies and things like that. But we've also got like a Guernsey Sings Facebook page. So all the different choirs that are taking place across the island are actually taking their meetings, doing it on there, giving people sort of the practice so they can go away, practice, and when they all come back together again, they should be able to sing together. We're also looking at setting up a virtual gay bar, but with lip sync battles and all sorts of things. And we're looking at a couple of different platforms for doing that. We are looking at house parties, one of them, which I think someone's mentioned in the comments. The big problem with trying to do something like that on Facebook is the music copyrights and things. They tend to shut down your Facebook page if you do that. So Twitch seems like a good platform. There's a couple of pub quizzes sort of going on there too. And then I don't know whether our lockdown is sort of exactly the same as the one on the mainland. But over the Easter holidays, we were looking to do like a treasure hunt. So we're going to try and take that randomly online with people's daily exercise that they can do. And we're going to link it into, this sounds a bit random, but Strava Art. So that's the app that you use when you go cycling or go walking. And we're going to sort of give people points, well, clues to points on the island that they can hit, and then try to make some piece of artwork with their daily walk and upload it. So just some really kind of, I guess, a bit random and off the wall stuff.
Yeah, that's really cool. Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. Gillian Fife was going to come in. You wanted to mention something about groups as well.
Yeah, hi, I'm with Alzheimer's Scotland. So all our physical locations obviously are closed, and we've had a need to move things like carer support groups, therapeutic groups, one-to-one sessions, one-to-one consultations with families with people living with dementia. So we're fortunate to have had access to the NHS Attend Anywhere platform, and we've started using that as an initial route to working with our smaller therapeutic groups. Now, the platform only kind of copes with up to about 6 people in a group, so it's not suitable for the larger groups, and we're looking at Zoom as a potential for some of those groups. But the advantage is if I don't know whether the kind of access might be more widely available during this, is that it purges all the information. It's an NHS approved platform. It covers us all in terms of all our kind of GDPR needs to be able to do that through Attend Anywhere. What we've had to do is a really rapid, accelerated kind of training program. So I've set up 110 staff with new logins over the last 2 days, trained 10 trainers so that we can roll that out So we've been drafting in people from across the organisation whose normal roles have been disrupted, and pulled them in, and they're also helping to, we're tripling our kind of helpline capacity as well. The other things that we're looking at are a kind of a WhatsApp group to give, I don't know if you've seen the World Health Organization WhatsApp group, where there's you type in a number and you get a response, so it's kind of like a chatbot one. So looking at something similar to that might try and help take the pressure off our helpline. And we're also asking our community activity organisers to record content, and that will be shared in a central space on the Alzheimer's Scotland website and categorised according to interest, so that if people can't make live groups and they need some support at home later on, they'll be able to access a music group or an art group or something like that, and trying to get that out to everybody. And I think that's me.
Could I ask, there's some great examples coming in chat and then coming in here as well. If you can add them into that document, that'd be really useful. So the kind of initial document that we shared, the kind of smaller one, and then what we're going to do afterwards is pull that stuff in to all the kind of broader case studies. And I guess this is probably, I guess, the big difference between these calls versus some other stuff is we're not using these kind of bigger open calls as a platform to say, here is an expert talking about a specific platform, sit and listen to them for an hour. But actually, how do we kind of join the dots? I'm already seeing 2 organisations in the chat who both work with people, with young people in the care system in Scotland, and actually kind of joining up the dots there as well. So that ability to kind of pull together best practice for us is a thing that really kind of adds value. And what we're also thinking about, just to give you an idea of this, is looking at where there's kind of common themes coming out, is running some webinars that are a bit more platform specific. So a thing that John's been asked a lot about at the moment is about telephony, which is, you know, it's pretty dull. It's not digital in the sense that we all think about digital, but actually for a lot of organisations, that's a huge thing at the moment, is they've maybe not got great telephony set up at the moment, and something's ringing out constantly at an office where there's no member of staff. How do you administer that where you've now got a massively dispersed staff team, and what does that look like? So John might pick up on that a wee bit. So we're going to try and maybe do some platform specific stuff. And the other thing which we're looking at is kind of thematic sessions as well, where we'll try and pull together 100 charities working in a really specific area to kind of look at what's the approach that we need to take around that. So one of the ones we're looking at the moment, older people in isolation, refugees and asylum seekers, relationship support, and also violence against women and girls services. So for us, they're kind of really 4 critical, time-sensitive areas at the moment that we really need to kind of get to grips with. John, I don't know if you've got anything that you want to kind of bring in just now.
Yeah, I'll maybe try and bring 2 points together. So one reason why we gave advice on phone systems is I think one big risk right now is a lot of digital tools might reach a lot of your service users, but you need to check that you're still accessible to everyone. So you may find some of the most vulnerable people you're working with are perhaps still trying to reach your standard inbound phone number. So what charities were asking was, right, we're not in our office anymore. What are the options for handling those calls? So a quite popular one that a lot of charities are using is a virtual switchboard. So you can work with a phone company who diverts all the individual numbers in your switchboard into a cloud-based switchboard. So then your staff have a mobile app, which basically, when they switch that app on, that's like their desk phone is logged in. That means they can then take calls, transfer them, get voicemail, and so on. So it's a nice solution in terms of it gives you a separation between your work calls and your own personal mobile device. Your mobile number isn't disclosed. And it also gives the user a nice experience because they just dial the number that they always used to. So that's something I'd encourage charities to do. We've written up a wee note of kind of options on that, but 2 people to talk to are DB Group, who are based in Linlithgow, or Class Networks. And they can do it on a flexible basis. So it could be quite a large number of numbers you need diverting, or it could just be you want a single line to go to one mobile. And it sounds kind of obvious, but it's like that kind of simple, practical thing that means you're still reachable by the people that were depending on your service. So it's important to do that as well. So I think as you're working to build out new ways of engaging people, a good thing to be doing might be to think, right, are the 20 people that we're seeing on this new space, this online space, is that the complete set of people we were helping before, or are some important people missing? And if they are, then it's probably going to be worth reaching out to them. So using that one-to-one time to pick up with what are they grappling with and what ways could you help them?
Yeah, excellent. That's great advice. John, are you able to stick the link, because someone's asking in chat about the note about virtual switchboards? If you could put the link again to the SCVO page, and that'd be really useful. Okay.
Yeah, certainly. Well, the caveat is, so we've listed a couple of suppliers as examples. That's not because we're saying they're the only game in town. It's just an example of somebody you might want to talk to see what the service involves. It's also just a really quick Google Doc. We pulled it together in response to an email query. So I think it should give you the information you need, but it's not like a formal, we recommend these providers and only these ones, because there's lots of other providers in this space, but it gives you a breakdown of what's involved. I'll pop that in the chat.
Perfect. Okay. John Dugan from Relationship Scotland and Fries and Galloway, you want to come in to make a point?
Yeah, thanks. Hi everyone. Some interesting questions regarding, or points regarding NHS Attend and Zoom. We were looking at exploring NHS Attend here in Dumfries and Galloway and have signed up. But we understand from some other colleagues from around the country who may have used it, they were having problems with it crashing quite a lot of the time. But one of the benefits we saw from NHS Attend was that it purges itself clean after each session. And that reassurance we are sort of needing as we move forward to looking at exploring Zoom, as we potentially work with couples in an environment where we need to make sure that everyone is protected, including the counsellor who will be actually seeing the other side of the technology. So where NHS Attend had some really good features, I think we're just maybe needing some more advice and some training possibly on Zoom to make sure that if we do offer it to clients, that we have everything in place to make sure people are safe and we're meeting the criteria that we should. We've moved over straight away to telephone counselling, and it's working really, really well. And we want to be able to make sure that we offer that across the various services that we deliver here in Dumfries and Galloway.
Okay, that's great. Thanks for sharing that, John. And again, just to kind of reiterate, the form that's in that Google Doc right at the top with the link, if there's any kind of specific training needs or kind of areas where you'd like more information, then do please use that form. Jen, is there anything either coming in the Google Doc or in the chat that you've kind of noticed in terms of people with specific questions or needing support or an issue that's kind of come up?
Finding tools, this is from Adam Groves, finding tools that are suitable for use with young people under 13 years old.
Okay, that's a good question. Okay. Anyone in the room who's got experience with working in that age group, so that pre-teen age group, and how you've done that? Anyone? Okay. There is. Sorry,
Emily?
I can just come in really if I'm honest, we run one-to-one mentoring with young people of secondary school age, and we're kind of struggling with the child protection process of it. So I think we can probably find some platforms, but it's about then making sure the child protection piece works. One of the things that we've been looking at is Google Classrooms, which doesn't necessarily give you all of the interactive stuff, but we know for some of the schools that we work with, that's what they're using with their young people already. And so they've got some familiarity of that. So definitely Google Classrooms is possible to use under 13s. It's not the most intuitive, but it does seem to work at a base level, and where young people are using that in schools, they've already got understanding. But yeah, I think it would be really helpful to maybe in that list of separate conversations that you've got, Ross, to have a kind of working with young people and child protection online conversation, because there's been a few comments in the chat, and I think there are a couple of us that are kind of trying to manage that piece.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, so that's maybe something we can think about. I don't know, John, is it worth quickly chatting about the kind of process that we've got in mind? So I guess the relationship where kind of how these calls fit in with the work that SCVO is doing, and then where it fits in with the kind of bigger Catalyst work and how that kind of flow works?
Yeah, I'd be glad to do that. I could share my screen if that's useful. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. So this has all happened really quickly. So we always had a long-term project at SCVO to keep supporting charities with digital. And as I think I said earlier, we always expected that to be going on over several years. But we're now in a place where charities suddenly need to do it overnight. So at one level, I find that hugely exciting because everybody gets what we've been trying to say for a long time. But at another level is that capacity issue of how do we make sure that as many charities as possible get given good guidance and support as quickly as possible. So just to give you an overview of how it's working, this is me just summarizing it for colleagues, but I'm just showing it here so you have a sense of how we're hoping it's going to work. So here we are on our Zoom call, and we've got all the people in the room. We're writing our Google Doc with our questions and answers, and Ross is doing a fantastic job on Twitter of keeping the conversation going. And as that very live conversation keeps moving, we're also taking stuff onto our third sector information hub. So there's a really big organized list there. I'll just share that link again in case you haven't got it already. A few seconds, I've got to find a link. Let me find the link later because I can't do two things at once.
For you, John. It's okay.
Ross has done it. Brilliant. So what happens when we've got this big list of resources is we're working as part of the Catalyst, which is a UK-wide project to resource charities to make really good use of digital. And what we're hoping over the next weeks will be there'll be a growing library of resources and guides. So it could be something as simple as how do I get started with Zoom? Or it could be how do I choose a platform that's got confidentiality built in? Or it could be about how I track information well across my team, how I use it. So the idea is that as you're part of these conversations, initially it will be quite free form and a lot of different topics, but all the information that we gather, we'll keep doing that so that the resources are there, so that as charities come and try and solve the same problems again, there's a toolkit there for them to do that. So that's why we're having the conversations like these, to just hear all the wisdom that's in the room. We're also using that Google form that I think we can hopefully link to again in the chat. And what you can do with that form is highlight the priorities that you're facing right now and tell us about what would be the most useful next thing to hear about or know about. And what that will do is give us a really strong steer on how we put the library of resources together. Because what we don't want to do is write resources that are really generic, that don't meet a need. Because the space we're in now, I think most charities are in a situation where they want things they can get started with within an hour and then get it out to users within a day. So it's a really quick development cycle. And in that kind of environment, we want to make sure that the guidance we've got available is very well fitted to charities' needs.
Perfect, thank you, John. So I've put a link to the SCVO Coronavirus Hub in there, and also the forum as well. Just say as well, I think this is going to go off slightly off tangent in terms of the digital stuff. The Coronavirus Hub has a lot of good general information for your organisation as a whole, out with the kind of digital stuff. So things like the Third Sector Resilience Fund that's just been launched. There's loads of other information in there that's worth going and having a look at. Also worth saying, just to give you a kind of flavour of the kind of bigger picture of things that are going on, is there's a lot of work happening behind the scenes. So particularly Sally and John's team is doing a lot of work with funders. There's a lot of funders who have been very flexible, and on that Coronavirus Hub is basically a full list of all the kind of main funders in Scotland. There's some of the kind of UK-wide ones as well. And that will give you a good overview of what your funder is saying on this in terms of their flexibility, in terms of how you deliver services. But there seems to be a pretty universal approach where we are not expecting the same level of reporting, but we are also of an understanding that this is about how do you deliver a service to your beneficiaries, not that you said you will do it in this way on your application form, and now we're still going to hold you to that during this really difficult period. Stuart's saying my audio has gone funny. It's better now, that's good. And there's a couple other funders behind the scenes trying to do some work to think about, well, for charities who do not have the tech skills or don't have the hardware or software, what might that look like? So I know there's a lot of work behind the scenes and trying to think about what support might look like around that. So I think over the coming days there's going to be some stuff to provide more support to organisations. And the other thing to say, I'm going to put a link in just now just to give you some kind of broader context, is the Scottish Government are doing a lot of work at the moment, which we're working on with them around ensuring that nobody gets left behind. And I put the link in, this is a blog post that Aaron from SCVO wrote. And right now they're looking at who are the most socially isolated groups who are also digitally excluded. So particularly the over 70s, but also a lot of the kind of shielded groups across Scotland. And really, how do we get devices to those people? How do we get them connected to the internet? And how do we make sure they've got basic digital skills? So that is a massive, massive task that the Scottish Government are undertaking at the moment. Broadly across the UK, I know that Nominate and BT in England and Wales are looking at some work in this space as well. So just to give you a picture where particularly you're working with groups who are very digitally excluded, there is work going on at the moment to think about what that might look like. Okay, anyone else want to come in with either any kind of best practice stuff that you've been doing, so new things that you've been doing in your organisation with digital, or if you've got any kind of specific questions of things that you're struggling with. So do you want to stick your hand up if you've got something you want to comment?
Ross Valentine said, can you invite John Dugan to share a few words about NHS Attend?
We did that.
Oh, sorry,
you're slow, catch up.
I am slow. I'm
only joking. Okay, anyone else? Maz, did you have your finger up there?
I didn't. Something anyway. I was going to say, I've started to do, this is more kind of like a team. I know some of you are probably just individually working and stuff, but we've got 14. I work for an organisation called Bad Dinosaur. We develop apps and technology, and we've worked with charities in the past. So recently we worked with MRT, riding therapy, to kind of build a digital product to support their kind of offering. And so it's been really cool and interesting to hear all of your guys' perspectives at the minute and stuff and like what you're doing. And what we've done with our teams to kind of keep the, I guess, team side of it is at the start of the day, we have a 10-minute stand-up on Zoom where all of us just go through what our plans are for the day. And then at the end of the day, we do a kind of 10-minute reflection piece as well. It's almost like you're going into the office and then you're leaving the office together. And like, so it's a nice way of keeping in touch, but also making sure that people are closing off and finishing their day. And so like, I think little things like that, just to kind of keep the mental stability and kind of the team camaraderie. I can't say that bloody word. But yeah, so that's what we're trying to do. And I think that's the end of the day thing has been really important for us because it even just picks up things like I've had a really shit day. And sometimes you need to just air that in the team. So yeah, I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, no, that's really good advice. John's got some stuff on remote working and kind of teams, which we can maybe share the link to in chat as well. Okay. Pasna's asked the Scottish Government work. So if you scroll up in the chat, Pasna, you'll see there's a link to the blog on the SCVO site, which Aaron wrote, and that kind of talks through some of that stuff. So I've been kind of leading a lot of the kind of strategic stuff around, I guess, the third sector role and that, what the training looks like. And then Irene, who you heard from earlier from More Collective, is developing a lot of the work around that space. So it's kind of happening fairly rapidly. There's nothing that I guess much more than that to say at the moment. The big issue the government's going to have is, you know, if we identify there's 50,000 people who are most at risk and are digitally excluded, where do we get 50,000 devices that have got connectivity from in a hurry when China's kind of locked down production at the moment and everyone's been buying digital devices on a scale that's not really been seen before? So there's a lot of challenges to overcome, but I do think, I mean, it's positive that the government's recognised this and is doing some work in that space. John has just shared kind of top 10 remote working tips in the chat. So for those of you thinking about how do you manage teams, how do you work remotely, then that's something to look at. Jenny, can I bring you in? Because I think that's a really important point you've made about the kind of phone top-ups and the kind of subscriptions that you're buying for some of your users. Do you want to come and tell us a wee bit about that?
Oh, that's me. Oh, hello everyone. Yeah, so basically just whenever John was talking about excluded groups, so we work exclusively with care experienced young people, but also young people who are at risk in Dundee. So, and we do that pretty much exclusively in school. So that's not an option for us at the minute. So we have a number of challenges. But one is it's not just a case of just being able to kind of radically pivot everything online, especially if you're a young person where they're having to make decisions around do we buy food or do we buy you know, access to internet or topping up phones. So so I suppose one of my issues is that how can we potentially gather up all those people who have smartphones lying in a drawer, with a, you know, that we can get unlocked or whatever, and we can potentially distribute those. And we've got a number of organisations that want to work in partnership with us to do other things. So for me, it's about adding that accessibility, or that as a possibility. The other thing, yeah, I think that's yeah, and we had a donation from one of our mentors, a very, very generous donation, and she's asked us to call it the kind of our COVID crisis pot, which is great, and we're using that to kind of buy kind of Netflix vouchers, just because, yeah, young people, but also phone top-ups. But if a young person doesn't have a phone, you know, a top-up isn't going to work. So that's basically where we're at just now, and obviously our other challenge is being able to move stuff online. Whenever we work with vulnerable people and young people, and we recruit mentors who are volunteers. So it's not a case of just our coordinators, right, you know, who are paid members of staff. So there's the kind of added safeguarding issues. So there's a couple of people on the thread already that I've been in touch with that we have exactly the same issue. So we can take that offline, but it's just, if anybody has any suggestions, that'd be fab. Cheers.
Okay, Jenny. Yeah, so if anyone, Maz has got a wee point that wants to come in on that one. Maz, do you want to come back in?
Sorry, yeah, just on that final thing, like I don't know if you guys know, Scotland is doing a No One Left Behind digital campaign at the minute, where they're trying to bring resource together to find out where there's no internet, where there's no broadband, who has devices, and then try to find the ability to pay for that and stuff. So like, it could be quite cool to kind of collaborate on that project. I'll try and find the link. I think I'm just to see if people want to get involved, because it's something that I was like, really cool. Like, it's the same thing you're saying, right? Like, people don't have devices, and it's like, what can we do? So yeah,
Great, thank you.
You've got it.
Just to say that Irene's just put the link into that, so the No One Left Behind Scotland. So a lot of that's. Jenny, you have the creakiest doors in the world. So,
sorry, well, I mute myself again, sorry.
Scotland IS are involved in that, the Scottish Government, so the link has just gone in, so the SCVO link, where Aaron, who I've been working with as well, so it's quite a big group of organisations. So Scotland IS are part of the Scottish Government, and we've been getting involved as well. Irene wanted to come in. Irene, do you want to come and say something?
It was just on Jenny's point there about safeguarding. I know there's a few people on the call as well that are supporting people with learning disabilities and sort of wider context. And I know we keep yakking back to this Google document, but safeguarding, we know, is a massive issue across the sector, because we've been looking at this within the context of digital inclusion for quite a long time. And safeguarding is the issue that comes up all the time. So I'd really suggest that anybody that's worried about that safeguarding starts looking at the examples that are there, because it's quite new to everyone. So it's an issue that we're struggling with within the field of digital inclusion even before COVID-19, and now everybody's going, oh my goodness, safeguarding is a #1 priority, because across the sector we're working with some of the most vulnerable people. So I think there's some great examples over on that document again, and or even a space to start going, yeah, we totally need some some advice and support. Carnegie UK's also been working on trying to pull together that theme of safeguarding. So it affects young people, but really it affects anybody within that that a PVG. If you need a PVG disclosure for your job, then safeguarding is an issue that kind of comes up all the time. So it's a much wider discussion, and I've been blown away by some of the great examples that are starting to appear over there. So so yeah, it's just flagging up safeguarding for lots of groups as an issue.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point, Irene, is what we're not talking about here is you sitting down from scratch inventing a new service, or sitting down from scratch trying to write a safeguarding policy, because this stuff exists. And I think that's particularly where a lot of the examples in there are not COVID-19 responses. What they are is tried and tested digital services that have existed for sometimes a number of years. Actually, you probably don't exist in the form of the document. You'll see something that's appropriate to your organisation, and you can actually roll it out fairly quickly. And some of the stuff, some of it's so simple and obvious. So things like Catalyst Housing Association down in England and Wales, for a couple of years now, have been running a fuel poverty advice service on WhatsApp. So exactly the same service that you get face-to-face in an office, but they run it on a WhatsApp chat really discreetly. So there's some really, really brilliant examples in there, and most of them are using off-the-shelf tools. And this is one of the things that keeps coming up time and time again. When we're talking about this stuff, what we are not talking about is building anything from scratch. One, we don't have the time, but two, the danger is in the realms of something which is not tried and tested, and actually your user base won't be using. So I would just kind of really say to people, the more that you can use something that your users are using and understand what's going to work for them, that needs to be your starting point. So where possible, where you've still got those good connections with people, whether it's in a kind of closed Facebook group or it's on phone calls or however you're doing it, is get an understanding of the digital platforms that your users are using at the moment, and make that your starting point and understand what their needs are right now. Okay, anyone else want to kind of come in? Just try to see if there's any hands up in the room. John, I don't know if you've got any kind of additional points that you want to make.
Yeah, it was just quickly to pick up on the point you made, Ross, about not needing to build it from scratch. So on our digital services page, which I'm just going to share, we've got 5 principles about why we chosen the particular examples that we use. And you can see there we've got they need to meet a user need, they had to be really quick to deploy, and they can be linked together and built upon. So what we're not talking about, as you said, is it's not the time for a very big project to do something that takes a long time to do. But what it is time to do is to do small tests. So I think particularly also linking into your point about funders, if your organization is in a situation where you're needing to very rapidly try online platforms, I think a really effective thing to do would be to do a small test and then learn from that. So what that will give you, particularly if you interact with a small group of users, is some really good insight about how they experienced the service. Was it difficult to sign in? Did it actually help them? Were there any issues that were missing that they would have got if it was face-to-face? You can do a bit of that. And then if you have that information gathered together and you're talking to a funder, that means instead of talking about an abstract thing on a PowerPoint deck, you've got something that a funder can understand and engage with. So I think that's a really constructive way of working. What you have to do, of course, is keep any risks or safeguarding things in mind, but that's a kind of thread you can have. You can say, right, when we're testing this, is this throwing up any consequences that we might not have thought of before? Because that's quite important to make sure you've covered those off. And sometimes you don't know them until you've done a little test with a small group.
Yeah, that's some really good advice. The other thing just to keep everyone in mind of, so Sarah from Snook had a call the other day. Maddie was part of that call as well, so Maddie from SCVO is on this call. And we're looking at, I guess, how can service designers help charities that are struggling through some of this stuff. So that's something I think there's going to be, as part of the catalyst, there's potentially going to be some support from service designers to look at some of these areas. So I think this is absolutely critical, because what we're doing is you're taking a service that has existed in a model potentially for decades, and now you're very, very quickly changing the way that you deploy that. So hopefully there'll be some support that comes into that space from the service design community. So it's worth following Snook on Twitter, but also John and I will update anything that we hear as that stuff comes through as well. Any other questions or points coming in from chat, Jen, or into the document?
Not at the moment.
Okay. Anyone else got any general questions? Roshin, have I pronounced your name right, Roshin? Yeah.
You have, well done.
Hey.
So I'm looking to find out a bit of background. We have a community centre in Bottle Park, and we tend to not do group-based activities with individuals, but rather provide the service by providing a building and supporting organisations where possible. But there is a couple of things that we do deliver, mainly around food. So we run a monthly community meal, and I've just got 2 years funding to run cookery workshops. And what I'm wondering is, has anybody successfully started to blend digital services with physical services? There's no point in me providing cookery classes online if people don't have access to the ingredients, for example. And it's something that we're looking to then try and design and deliver. So through the used platforms, through YouTube and things, but I need people to be able to get the food that we're cooking with to be able to then do it successfully.
Okay, anyone from the call got any thoughts on that one specifically? Conan, don't see any hands up on this one. Do you have, can I ask, do you have access, do you have a good relationship with anyone who's delivering food at the moment to some of those homes? I'm conscious like organisations like Food Train are doing a lot of deliveries at the moment, and some other organisations.
I don't think Food Train I don't think delivers in our area. Young People Futures are doing deliveries at the moment. Our local community, and our funding is dependent. So there is a relationship there, but I also know that they're struggling. Until such a time where the resources are there, thanks. There's nothing worse than hearing your own voice. The resources are there to be able to then facilitate that in a much bigger platform. So we get a fair share delivery, and at the moment we are sending the fresh items from our fair share delivery out into the community through YPF, but we're hoarding the non-perishable items at the moment because we don't know how bad this situation is going to get. The food banks are running out of food, and for anybody that knows it, Pottle Park and surroundings are not a well serviced area at the moment, so we have some links there, but the capacity for that is unknown at the moment.
There was a really good point. I mean, it doesn't address the issue, I guess, of the kind of food and the delivery and making sure that you tie in with that. But Parisa made a point about Jack Monroe's recipes, and I guess just the approach that she's using, I think particularly through her Instagram or other channels. And I don't know if that's kind of come up, or if you've got any thoughts on that, Roshan.
I'm also the co-chair of the communications subgroup for the Rising Places for the whole of the Canal Wharf, and we've recently set up an Instagram that's not kind of went anywhere yet, but I've been posting on the Twitter about Jack Monroe and the Twitter timeline and stuff, trying to encourage people to be able to go onto that and ask questions, but whether or not that's reaching the right people within our moment is unknown.
Okay. Jen, I know you hate speaking on Zoom calls, but I'm going to slightly pick on you here because I know you volunteer for Refugee as well, and there's been a lot of work of distributing food to refugee families across Glasgow, and I don't know if there's any thoughts you've got in terms of what you guys are doing and how that might tie in, or just any lessons learned.
Yeah, it might be quite helpful if I just talk through the process that we're doing. So basically Refugee are offering standardised toiletry and food parcels to people who are requesting them. So that's anybody, it's not just necessarily the refugee community. So we have set up a kind of virtual number using a service called Text Magic, and all the requests come through there. So basically, as somebody who would want to request a pack would text the word pack to a number. They'll then have an automatic response asking them to tell us their address, their name, what items they require, and how many people are in their household. And then it would be nice to automate this, but we're logging those requests in a Trello board, and the team at that end will then, who are in the donation office, sort that way, and that is working really, really well just now. So it's just basically ticking off all the requests, and the team of volunteers are taking them to each person's address with no contact delivery. So we are leaving the packs at the door, but through the text magic service, we're able to actually send a text when the volunteer's on their way. So that the person who's receiving the pack can be notified that they're on their way and to listen out for their door being trapped. So, and we set that up a couple of days ago, and we must be at about 150 requests at the moment. So it's been a really good way to manage that, because I don't really know how we would have managed that without some kind of process. We are, it's an iterative process, so we are making slight adjustments to it, because for example, we were getting very specific requests through, so people asking for very specific items, which just isn't feasible at the moment, especially with the volume that we have. So just things like tweaking our language that we're using as we go forward is working for us, but it's very much a process that we're learning as we go. But that's just a bit of insight into how we're working that.
That's really useful, Jen. Thank you. So I put the link to Text Magic down there, and I think this goes back to John's point about that ability to take two simple platforms, them working together, and suddenly you've got something really robust off the shelf. So, you know, the obvious thing around that was, we need to build some kind of login system, and it needs to be tied into a big clunky Salesforce CRM. But actually, that's an off-the-shelf Trello board and a Text Magic account that anyone can sign up for in a couple of minutes. So just when you're thinking about this stuff, is go and look at the examples in that doc, go and look at some of the kind of tech solutions that John's mentioned in that link, and just do be thinking about some of these off-the-shelf solutions that are literally two things that are going to work together and enable you to deliver that service. It's an amazing example. Okay. What I'd like particularly, just because I'm conscious we're going to finish up at 12:30, and one of the things we've not touched on a huge amount at the moment, it'd be interesting to see if there's anyone working on this in the room, is around accessibility, and I mean that in a really broad sense. So if you're working with the deaf community, or if you're working with people where English isn't the first language, but generally anything around accessibility that anyone in the room wants to share, so any changes you've had to make, or particularly if you work with a group where you've had to think about accessibility in terms of moving services or information online. Anyone want to talk about that in the group? I'm scouting about to see if there's hands up. It's quite hard on a Zoom call. Graham, do you want to come in on this one?
Yeah, so I'm working, I run a couple of charities, a youth work charity and also a dementia charity. The dementia charity, obviously, we're facing lots of issues there around people that are don't have access to technology, maybe aren't particularly tech savvy. Even when they do have technology, there's all sorts of issues around dementia, around whether somebody is able to deal with the things that you're trying to get them to do, whether they have someone there to support them through it. So there's not going to be any one size fits all solution for us. So we're kind of looking at each individual case as it stands, and are having to look at non-digital solutions for a lot of them, because it's just not going to be an option. So we're looking at setting up things like letter writing letters to people, setting up actual newsletters that we will post to people, and can then phone them up when they have the newsletter, and use that as a way of doing some activities with them. As far as the technology goes, I think we're doing a lot of things that you mentioned earlier about, rather than trying to force people to use Zoom when they've never used it before. If they're using WhatsApp, if they're using FaceTime, if they're using Messenger, then sticking with what they know. Probably that this is kind of moving away from accessibility a little bit, but probably one of the biggest issues we're facing is actually connectivity itself. And this is something that I don't think has really been brought up yet. Rural Scotland has very, very poor connectivity in a lot of areas. I thought I had reasonably good broadband in my house, but because my two daughters and my wife are now working from home as well, I'm having to use a hotspot on my phone for this call. If you drive 2 miles away from my house out into the countryside, you're looking at effectively at dial-up speeds. So a lot of our members who live in more remote rural areas, digital solutions just aren't going to be an option at all. So we're looking at what can we do over the phone, what can we do physically through post. So I'm really interested if anybody's coming up with any interesting ideas about doing things through the post. And also the other thing obviously we're very concerned about is, if we do set up round robins of letters and things, which I think a lot of people have said they're really interested in, how do we do that safely? Because we don't want people posting the virus through the post. So if anybody's got any ideas about how we could set things up from a hygiene point of view for doing things physically, I'd be really interested to hear it.
Okay, thanks for that, Graham. Perfect. Okay, John's going to come and John's got a point to make.
I just want to quickly come in on all these wonderful examples of using techniques that are tailored to groups with mixed ability and access to digital. These are all really important stories because the No One Left Behind Digital Scotland campaign that we talked about, one of the things that the voluntary sector will really need to do is inform that programme. So make sure that as the ideas get developed, they actually work in practice. So my colleague Aaron will be blogging as the project develops, and I'm sure Ross will be updating as well. But a really useful thing that we can do from this is these stories that we've heard about charities using techniques to work with people in a way that fits into their lives will be really useful, because that means that when things are considered, like, what kind of devices might people need, what kind of training might they need, what kind of connectivity issues might need to be solved, they're all in that picture so that it's going to be realistic and do a good job of reaching more people. So that's really useful to hear, and we'll definitely be in touch to get more ideas.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, John. Okay. Okay, Richard, do you have a question, or do you want to come into the main chat? Are you happy with that, Richard?
Yeah, living a 10% community, I would say 40% of the female population, English is not their first language. So we have done like ESOL classes, which we've run together with other partners, and my concern for myself and Suzanne, who's the community development work, is how now in this period of time, whether it's 3 weeks, 3 months, 6 months, 12 months down the line, is how we keep those that population engaged and that they're not left behind. Because I would say also technology won't be great, but it's also for us how we keep that engagement going. So if anybody's got any best practice out there or seen it done before in other ways, it would be great to find out.
Okay, thanks, Richard. Anyone want to come in on that? I mean, I'm particularly interested. We've not touched on this a huge amount, but I guess, for some of you, you will have a very clearly defined user list of your service users. So you might have, a kind of list that you blast information out on WhatsApp, or they're all collectively together in a Facebook group, or you've got an email list, or you've got a telephone list. For some of you, it might be a bit looser. And I guess for those of you where it is a little bit looser and it's not a kind of distinct client list, how you've kind of reached out to those communities, whether it's through something as simple as local kind of Facebook groups, but to let people know.
Ross, we lost your sound. Shall I talk for a wee bit while you just clear your throat every now and then? I've got a related example. Actually, a charity rang me this morning, and they did language learning in care homes. So that's obviously not going to be able to continue right now. And they've not developed it yet, but the thing they're going to go ahead and test is using Google Hangouts Meet, which is a very simple video conferencing platform, but using it with Google Slides as well, because you can present as you talk. So what they're interested in is, as well as doing the language, like having the conversation, being able to show pictures and ideas. So that could be one way of reaching learners who have a low capability with a language, is using visual materials as well, because that's generally possible on a call. And the other thing that they're going to do is, with their first few tests, is record it so they can then look at it as a team and see, was this doing a good job? Is there anything they want to change? So that's just a quick idea. Let's see if Ross is back on.
Does my audio work now? It does work. Excellent. Okay, cool. Thanks for that, John. And that was really useful. Okay. I'm conscious we've got about 10 minutes left. Anyone else have any questions or any points that they want to raise? Is everyone confident in terms of understanding where that information is? So if you scroll through the chat and the kind of Google Doc with all the case studies and examples and policies and safeguarding and privacy are in there, hopefully everyone's managed to find that. If you've not, let us know in the chat and we'll kind of signpost you that as well. And also all the SCVO resources, there's an absolute goldmine of stuff in there. So not just the digital stuff, but stuff around funding at the moment. A lot of the kind of Scottish Government stuff, which I've mentioned, is all in there as well. So that's worth looking at. Okay, John, have you got any kind of final stuff that you want to kind of share or talk about before we kind of wrap up?
I guess the only thing I'd say is, like, I think Jim just made a point in the chat about Google Hangouts is free right now. So basically at the moment, because everybody is facing the situation of needing video conferencing, almost every good platform has got an offer that's either entirely free or free on a trial basis. So there's a lot of good options to choose from. I think if you've got existing infrastructure like Office 365 or Google G Suite, both of which are free at various levels to charities, it's worth starting with that, because that will be well integrated with your systems. Your staff team won't need to learn a new system. So I'd probably kind of start with where you are, but also think about what the user experience is like. So if your users are all going to have to download an app to be on board, that can be challenging. Another point that came up with chat is, can people dial into video conferences? And yes, they can. So they can definitely do that on Zoom. They can also do it on a platform called Cisco WebEx. So your host will need to be online to kind of control the call, but you can have a situation where multiple participants are just dialed in using the mobile network. So that can be a good way of bringing people in. All right, they won't see video or be seen, but they can at least participate. So there's a lot of good options there. What we'll probably be doing is trying to bring that together into a kind of overview of the various main platforms. But most people, I think, will be in a situation where you can try something that's entirely free at this point, and it's really just a case of learning the features.
That's great, thank you, John. I've also just put a link in a Charity Digital Exchange, which a lot of you are probably signed up for, because a lot of people get their free Microsoft 365 licenses through that. There's also in there the ability to access a whole range of other platforms as well. So things like the business version of Zoom, which you get really heavily discounted in there. But just to go back to John's point, a lot of these platforms have either lifted a lot of the restrictions on the free accounts, or they're given kind of pro accounts for nothing. So Zoom's lifted the 40-minute restriction on the free accounts at the moment, which has made a big difference. Just well, we've got a wee bit of time, and I noticed that, and I don't know if she's dialed in or not, but Jen Goff from Waverley Care is in. Jen, are you able to unmute, or can you hear or not? Is Jen about? She vanished. Oh, that's a shame. Right, so Jen's, they've just recently very, very rapidly launched live chat functionality. The example is in the document. So
hi, sorry, Ross.
Hey, hello, Jen.
I am here. I was just like panicking, trying to get myself unmuted and videoed in. Yeah, do you want me to talk a little bit about our live chat?
Yeah, briefly, because I think because yours is a good example because you've done incredibly quickly, and I think it was always, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was something that had been a plan for a while, but just having to deploy it really rapidly. And I don't know if you could just quickly to kind of tell people about how that's worked.
Yeah, so we basically we rebranded last year, and as part of that with the new website, I had worked on starting up live chat services. It wasn't funded, so we used a function called talk.to. You might be already aware of it. It's a free function that you can get on your website, so I would absolutely recommend it. So at that point, we had actually just started the live chat services on a very small scale. It was only kind of 1 to 4 o'clock on a Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. That's just largely because it's all we could do capacity-wise, and we wanted to kind of trial it and see whether it was working. Fortunately, the function is there the whole time, so you can use it whenever. So it was perfect for this stage because we just essentially extended the hours 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. It's been really helpful for us because we've got a lot of people who are contacting about access to testing services and things like that. So it's actually become almost a secondary way of answering questions that would have been fielded to the NHS. And it makes it easier if we've got questions that we need to speak to clinicians about. It just kind of, it almost is an extra barrier. So we're hoping that it kind of helps with that area work. But alongside that, then we had that experience of the talk function. So we extended it to one of our sub-brand websites, which is sx.scot. And now their services are specifically for gay, bisexual, and other men who have sex with men. So we kind of felt that we needed a separate talk function because the questions and support people would need there is very separate. The thing is that talk is a fantastic function. It's really, really easy to use. I've extended it with a couple of our staff members. You know, we're using Microsoft Teams, so when you're sharing your screen, you can show someone through how to use it really, really easily. So it's extremely accessible, even if maybe not all your staff are as digitally literate. Because I know for us, you know, there's lots of people who are really comfortable using just online life. Then there's lots of people who, you know, this is something kind of new to them as well. So I would definitely recommend it. But if anybody has any questions about using it, the great thing about Talk is that they've got all their GDPR policies, you know, their T's are crossed and their I's are dotted. So it's a really safe function to use. People can download their transcripts afterwards. So it's a very transparent function to use as well. And again, it's free, so it's accessible for all of us, as long as you can get your developer to integrate it into the website. And I don't think it wasn't a very difficult thing for our developers to do. They said it was easy enough. So if you're technically minded, I'm sure you'll understand the ins and outs of that a little bit more. But if the developers were saying it was easy, then it must have been easy enough. So, I mean, if anybody has any questions about it or anything, you're more than welcome to contact me about it. But I would recommend it because it's not useful for all of our client groups. Many of the people we're working with they're not able to, they're just digitally excluded. But for the people who, I think we're getting support requests from people who otherwise would never have actually come to us for support, people who maybe are just going for a routine STI test and now they're finding they can't get through to the NHS on the phone, so it's specific to our services in a way, but I'm sure there's lots of your services that it will work for as well.
Thanks very much, Jen. If you could ping a link to that specific platform in the chat, that'd be good.
No problem.
And if there's not a link, I'm pretty sure you've got your stuff in that document. But if you don't, if you're able to stick it in the document, that'd be amazing. That'd be really helpful for everyone.
Yeah, so I have it in under physical health, and I think I popped it under mental health as well, just because our services kind of support bridge those things.
Can I just come in with one very quick thought, Ross, in case we run out of time? Which is, it probably feels like we need to learn a lot very quickly right now. But one thing to keep in mind is we can't all be experts overnight.
I'll talk while John's child.
Yeah, so what I was going to say is we can't all be experts in a day. So we're going to learn a lot as we go. So don't be worried if you're feeling like this is all quite unfamiliar territory and you're not sure where to go with. And I think quite a good strategy is to think through one piece of your service at a time and try something out, see how it works. So you may feel under pressure to kind of make everything virtual overnight, but you don't need to do that. You can do it in a more bit by bit way and learn as you go.
Yeah, good advice. Yeah, I think there was a charity, I think maybe in the last call, actually talking about, you know, they had to take a decision very quickly. You know, what is the most critical part of our service where we deliver something to a particularly vulnerable group? that we can't afford not to be delivering this, and starting with that, and then thinking about the stuff, not that anything that you do is a nice to have, but actually thinking about where is there a group that if we don't deliver this very quickly are going to be isolated and at risk if we don't do this, and then thinking about where you can move into other areas of the organisation. So I think that's a really good piece of advice. So yeah, we're going to wrap up just now. So we're planning on having these kind of bigger open calls weekly. As said, we're also planning thematic calls, but then also potentially platform specific calls alongside this. All the stuff that's gone into the chat, all the kind of great stuff that's gone in there, and that Google Doc will be scooped up and put into the kind of main Google Doc, and that kind of flow process that you saw before, where SCVO and the Catalyst will also be working on more specific guides. The form link as well, which is in that Google document, if you've got something that's a really specific request, so if you're struggling with the idea of live chat for your service users, or you're trying to bring together groups remotely and you're concerned about safeguarding, if there's any kind of specific questions, you can use that form and you can get to join that form. Just finally, I guess to say thanks for everyone coming along and sharing so many good examples, some amazing stuff today that we didn't even cover in the last one, and just kind of keeping the community going. And yeah, thanks very much. That was great. Thank you. And we'll see you all soon. Good luck, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Catch you all later. Okay.